to refer to an action of that is being proposed that the legislature take. Oh, hold on. Okay, I had to agree to be recorded. This word is not in my lexicon. I meant to say ridiculous, and I didn't say that. I knew immediately and tried to recover, but really I was so shaken up, I couldn't even come up with a good recovery. Just so that you know, my whole day was awful because I just felt so horrible about what I said. I just offer my deepest and most heartfelt apologies. A good friend of mine from within the community called me and said, no, I know you're not like this. And I said, I deserve everything that I get. Because for a few reasons. First of all, growing up, we had a family member who had Down syndrome. And in my house, you could say a lot of words and not get in trouble. There were only 2 words that you could not say. And if you did, it was swiftly met with corporal punishment. One of them was the word retarded, because no one would ever want to diminish a family member. So on behalf of my own family, my mom passed away, but I do know that on that day she was sending lightning bolts down at me. The other thing is that currently I've been engaged with the DD community, and we've taken 2 brothers under our wings. We include them in family events and we watch over them. I took them for their COVID tests and I treated their dog for fleas. They're a part of our family, and I would never want to do anything to damage my relationship with them. And I also have many parents in my district who have been so amazing and have been wonderful partners to help me understand what I can do as a legislator to help the DD community. For those of you who are in my district and you tuned into the candidate forums that I engaged in last fall, you didn't hear me refer to people as disabled. You heard me refer to them as differently abled, because I believe that we all have gifts to bring, and I believe that we all have the opportunity for growth. I look at Noah Seidel, and every time I see him testify on behalf of SAIL, I'm blown away by the progress from when he started to today. He's large and in charge. And so I feel very strongly I did a really dumb thing. And if you were offended, I don't blame you. We have a member who often pops off and offends people. And I know that if he had done what I did, I'd have picked up the phone and said, what on earth were you thinking? So I don't begrudge anyone any frustration or anger. But I would like for you to know that so many in the community have reached out in such a lovely way that it only makes me want to work harder for you and with you. So I humbly ask for forgiveness from you.
You got my apology.
Thank you so much for those words, Senator Rivers. And we really want to take this opportunity as a moment of education, and just sharing that. A lot of people, they see the R word and they just think it's slang, and it's not slang. It's been a word historically that's been used to hurt people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It was originally used to put us in those institutions, to allow us to be paid some minimum wage. and a lot of other horrible abuses were done under that word.
I
And
was
so
called that before, and it I was called I was called that before, and it was really offensive.
I think
Yeah.
we should all, everybody should needs to be careful. You'll think before you say
Yeah.
something. Will affect some
Yeah,
because the
so-
R word is very, very hurtful.
My
It's
mom
very-
says that.
One at a time, please. Thank you. So it's really important that just for you to know the history. That word, you know, it brings back a lot of those memories for a lot of people. Whether it was being called that on the playground, for myself personally, I had people using that word against me and telling me that if you keep acting like the R word, you're going to be put back in an institution. And I was put in an institution when I was born. And so it brings fear to people. And so I just wanted you to know about that history. Also, I have some people want to say something to you, so I'm gonna let Sean Latham and Eric Mathis give their statements to you. They asked that they make statements before. They had asked me before this meeting even went on if they could make a statement to you, and so I'm going to let them
May
do
I-
that. Sean, you go
May
first.
I say
Latham. Mike, you can say it after Eric, okay?
Mike.
Okay.
Senator Rivers, my name is Sean Latham, the Director of Allies and Advocacy, our state's self-advocacy network partner for the DD networks. While Allies does appreciate and accept the apology, we do want to stress to you how sad and hard it was to hear you say the R word, and even more sad to some degree, that nobody corrected you in that moment. We want to make it known to you that this word not only hurts people's feelings in the moment, it also has a lasting damage to minimize a person's worth throughout life. People who have been called the R word have often not been given many opportunities others have, just because society has treated them as less than a citizen. In fact, even today, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are still treated like less than second-class citizens in our state, by still having institutional settings and not paying people a living wage. We demand that you and your fellow legislators take steps to prevent this from happening again, and we hope to talk to you more about this issue in a sit-down meeting.
You're welcome at my campfire anytime.
Okay.
Who's
Eric,
next,
you're
Stephen?
next. Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Rivers. My name is Eric Mathis. I have Down syndrome, and I do have a lot to say, but I will be brief. One, I am offended of what you have used. Two words in particularly, the R word and stupid or something like that that you said when you were doing that. And hearing that, basically, yes, it does treat people with in our society today still treats people with IDD less than citizens, and that is just unfair. Even though, yes, you did apologize, and we may want to thank you, but still, you may not, but I know other people will, and that is only an type of an excuse that people have always used. Oh, well, I'll never use that again. In time, the other legislators will, and I just want to let you know that. And also, being back, I know I haven't been in an institution, but I know back when in the 70s there was no information. And the delivery doctor told my mom to put the retarded Down syndrome person in a RHC. And I didn't know that at the time, but of course, when I was old enough to hear that from my mom, I thought, wow, but my mom said, no, I'm going to keep my son. So here I am living in a community like anyone else. I'm advocating for those who have been in the institution. I know it's different and very hard and all that, but just please use, instead of using the R word, respect is a new R word. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Ivanova, can I make a quick comment?
Go for it.
So, and Ivanova probably knows this because she has her finger on the pulse in Olympia. So I was super excited to see a budget come out that actually shut down Rainier School. And
Yeah!
I know, right? But then someone introduced, because I went there a couple years ago and it was horrifying. They should sell it so they can make scary movies there. It's that horrifying. And so I had been working and thought that we had made enough progress at Furcrest that
Hello?
we could just get rid of Rainier.
Hello?
So I was really sad when they put it back in to fund it to the tune of $56 million more dollars. And I thought to myself, how many more people could we take care of if we had that $56 million more dollars? I think we should sell that facility. I think we should get a good penny for it. I think the money should go to the trust fund so it can bear interest and help to create a sustainable funding mechanism so that when the economy goes down, the services stay the same. So I don't see a condition under which I can vote for this budget, but I do want you to know that the other thing that's happening, and you'll all see the result of this soon, is the examination of the waiting list to find out how many people, to give us more information about who's really on that list. Are they still in our state? Where are we at? So that we can then begin to chip away at it again. So there's some good things happening. It's a little disappointing to me that we weren't able to keep that shutdown Rainier fully in the budget, and God bless Senator Rolfes for putting that in there. I can't even tell you how excited I was to see it, but we'll keep working on that. I'm told it's a gentle glide path down. I don't think we need a gentle glide path. I feel like we have places for people to go in communities, which is the other thing that I heard you talking about, Sean. I think when you shut people who are differently abled away, you prevent the kinds of discussions from happening where people can see differently abled people in the community and do relationship development and gain understanding. And so that for me is a huge thing, that we need to have differently abled people in the community to be exposed to everyone so everyone can develop understanding. And when we shove them away in a human warehouse, that doesn't do anything to help. So that's been my position for years. And so I wanted to share those thoughts with you.
Thank
And
you so
also,
much.
Evelyn Perez has been amazing, and I hope we can get someone who can fill her shoes. So.
Indeed, indeed. I 100% agree. So there's some questions in the chat. Another self-advocate, Zach Sudek, has asked a question. What are your plans to undo the harm of using the R word? We appreciate the apology. From my standpoint, actions speak louder in words.
So I did a public apology in the same forum that I in which I created the offense. You probably never see video of that because the apology is never as sensational as the offending comment. But I also reached out to my colleagues to say, you know, this was really thoughtless and hurtful. And I know you are all better than this, and I thought I was better than this, but, you know, please be aware. I did an interview, I've done an interview with many media outlets, and I will say, based on some of the emails and communications that I've received, if there is another silver lining other than me being a greater advocate, if that's possible, for the DD community, it's that there's a public discussion happening right now that I think really needed to happen. Some people reached out to me and said, oh, I guess I didn't realize that was a bad word, which I find interesting because I've known since I was a child, although because of my family situation, I knew, but there are people now going, oh, okay. And I think that's really valuable. Is there something else that you would like to see me do that I haven't already done?
I think this is Zach. I'm the one who asked the question. I think just from my standpoint, like continuing to advocate for the institutions closing and continuing to advocate for community inclusion, I think will be useful and helpful. So we appreciate that.
Thank you for that, Zach. Mike, did you want to say something real quick?
Yes, my mother the doctors told my mothers to put me in there. That's one of the reasons why that I want them shut down. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you, Mike. And now Krista wants just to let you know, we're actually going to be having a press conference at 1 o'clock today about the institutions and how we're, the Shut 'em Down Coalition has organized a press conference, and love for your support.
Even Nova, I want to tell you something. There's a lot of support for this in the legislature. It just seems like a handful of people. So I don't understand. You know, you hear snips and clips of what people say, but it just doesn't pass the straight face test when you look at how much we're spending to keep them open and the condition that we're keeping people in. Gross.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear. Krista, did
Yeah.
you want to say something?
Hi, Senator. My name is Krista Melhofer. I'm the program administrator for People First of Washington. And we have a long history of education for and by people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and done a lot over People First language over the years, and would love to be of service to yourself and anyone else to bring people up to speed as language changes, as things change, and want to let you know that we're here for that. Our board does meet on Thursday. Mike, our president, has already spoken to you and offered up his forgiveness as president of our board. So we will be talking about this topic and many others, and appreciate your willingness to come for individuals themselves and make an apology. Mike, is there anything else you wanted to add? And of course, institutions are our number one. We don't understand why we're still here in 2020 and why Washington State continues to threaten legal action by its inaction. And in fact, not only has stepped back on its offer to close Rainier, it seems like, but is trying to expand institutionalization with its proposals.
Yeah, I got something to say.
Yes, I will pass it over to our president, Mike Raymond.
I want them shut down so bad I can please close them down when we say to close them down. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So we're gonna only have one more person speak, Adrian, and then sadly we'll have to move on. But thank you, Senator Rivers, for continuing this dialogue.
Thank you,
Adrian?
Ivanova.
Thanks, Ivanova. Hi, Senator Rivers. I'm Adrienne Stewart with the Developmental Disabilities Council. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. I just had a few quick things to share. First of all, I'm a twin sibling to a fabulous person with a developmental disability, and I'm also now a parent to 2 kids with developmental disabilities. And I know I share a lot of the same things that have already been said here, so I won't repeat them, but I will amplify them. I want to share too with, with this group that in law school, I had a professor who also used the R word. And I went up to that professor at the end of class and let him know how offensive and demeaning that was to the disability community. And his reply was, well, it's in the DSM manual, so I'm going to keep using it. And I share that because that's a really different approach than you've taken. And you didn't have to take this approach of immediately apologizing and seeking the repair work with this community. And so I just appreciate that. And I really appreciate the humility with which you've come and offered your apology to this community. I will say that, unfortunately, not much has changed for our community over the last 40 years. We still segregate children in schools. We segregate them all throughout the K through 12 education, and adults, as you've heard today, are still trying to close down state-run institutions, which, as you have said, amount to human warehousing of people. And that's a problem because, as we've said, words become thoughts and thoughts become actions. And so with that said, I just want to offer to what Krista was saying, if we can be resources to you and to your legislative staffers to come in and do trainings on respectful language, on the dearth of services that are available to the disability community, and how we're fighting every day to try and advance civil rights and opportunities for people with developmental disabilities and their families. We would welcome that more concerted, intentional partnership. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your comments. And thank you, Ivanova. You always bring so much to the discussion when you testify, and you are Adam and Isaac's personal hero. So keep on being you.
Thank you so much, Senator Rivers, and thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us. I know it must have been really hard, and I know you felt terrible. We all make mistakes. We've all done things that we've regretted. And so I really appreciate you being strong and coming up on here and speaking to us and letting us hold you accountable for that language. And I really appreciate it personally. So thank you.
Thank you for your grace. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was a really awesome meeting with Senator Rivers. Now we're going to hear from Jake Morey, who will talk to us about the governor's proclamation. And he's from the Arcus Anamis Parent Family Coalition Coordinator. Take it away, Jake.
Jake, your mic is off.
I have so many microphone problems, it's not even funny. Thank you very much for that.
Here you go.
All right. So I have in my hand here the proclamation from the governor about Autism Awareness, Acceptance, and Appreciation Month. So without further ado, I'll get started on reading that. Whereas autism is a developmental disability that typically appears during the first 2 years of life and continues through the individual's lifespan but typically is not diagnosed until after 4 years of age. And whereas 1 in 59 children are now identified with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, almost 4 times more boys, 1 in 42, than girls, 1 in 152. And whereas there are many different characteristics in individuals with autism, delayed or deficient communication, decreased or unresponsive social interaction, unusual reaction to normal stimuli, a lack of spontaneous or imaginative play, and behavioral challenges. And whereas there are many positive characteristics in people with autism, including attention to detail, unique way of thinking, gift for hyperfocus, artistic abilities. And whereas there is no known cause and no known cure, however, with continuous therapy, some individuals can learn to acclimate and mask their symptoms. And whereas applied behavior analysis with emphasis on positive support has become widely accepted and used as a treatment to improve a variety of skills. And whereas society's negative attitudes about autism create significant stress on people with autism and their families. And whereas all individuals with autism should be included as valuable members of our community, provided with opportunities and supports to live, work, and play as independently as possible. And whereas individuals with autism, their families, caregivers, and advocacy organizations are striving to bring about positive changes for people with autism. And whereas through research, training, public services, support groups, advocacy, and increased awareness, we will be more accepting, inclusive, and better equipped to support the growing number of individuals with autism and their families. And whereas April is observed nationally as Autism Acceptance Month, and April 2nd has been declared World Autism Awareness Day by the United Nations General Assembly. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby declare April 2021 as Autism Awareness, Acceptance, and Appreciation Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. Signed this 15th day of March 2021, Governor Jay Inslee.
Yay, yay.
Very good, man. Very good.
Thank you, Jake. We just have some comments for you. Zach Sudek has said, well, Adrian wants to know who wrote this. And then Zach commented saying, for those who are not aware, masking autistic traits is a bigger predictor of suicide idealism of autistic adults, according to research. Adrian said, ABA survivors have a lot. I can provide feedback on the proclamations. Opportunities for education are just around the corner.
This is from the governor's office. So as far as feedback and stuff, I think you would have to go through the governor's office. And that masking comment, I actually, when I read this ahead of time, and I actually marked that on here too, because I thought that was a little odd. And I didn't think that was the best way to phrase that as well. But it is, like I said, it's from the governor's office. And so I didn't put it together or anything like that. So any sort of questions or comments about the proclamation itself will have to be directed there.
Okay, thank you, Jake. No, so just trying to get all these comments. Diane Stadden says, if you had feedback, please send it to me, dianestadden@org. Eric Warwick says, thank you for bringing that up, Adrian. I'm autistic and was in ABA-based EBD program with the Bellevue School District. So that's some good feedback, and hopefully we can get that. Oh, and Zach Surdek just posted the study that he was referring to in his previous comment. So thank you, Zach. Now, is left with any other questions for Jake? Or Jake, do you have any other comments you'd like to make? We can move on. Okay, I will say it looks like we can just move on then. So our next presenter is actually a co-worker of mine from the UW Land, Jen, who is Jen Goetz. She's the attending psychologist, Seattle Children's Hospital Autism Center. It also works with the land as well. So take it away, Jen. So good to see
Great.
you.
Good to see you too, Ivanova. And I saw your little Hildegard there with visiting us for a moment. What a doll. There she is. Oh my goodness. So sweet. It's nice to see her, and nice to see you too, Ivanova. And thank you for inviting me, Diana, and others to be a part of this conversation and to present today. So I wear
Pleasure.
multiple hats. One of my hats, as Ivanova said, is that I'm the director of our LEND program, and I'm going to spell out that acronym. It's Leadership Education for Neurodevelopmental and Related Disorders, and it's based at the Center on Human Development and Disability, CHDD, and that's an interdisciplinary training program, and Ivanova is our self-advocate faculty lead, who is on parental leave right now, but coming back soon. And I'm also on the regular UW faculty in the Department of Psychiatry. And as part of that role, I am what's called an attending psychologist at the Seattle Children's Autism Center, and I direct our diagnostic services. So that hat today is what I'm going to be wearing, and to share more about our programming that we have at the Autism Center at Children's. Diana also asked that I give just a kind of just a broad strokes overview of autism spectrum disorder. I think many of us are probably already aware, but I'm just going to kind of bring us all on the same page and talk about what we're looking for when we think about a possible autism diagnosis in an individual. So we're looking for differences in two different areas mostly. We're looking for differences in social communication and then repetitive behaviors or restricted interests. And you have to have both. So that's why there's this arrow here, this overlap between differences in social communication and in the presence of repetitive behaviors or restricted interests. And here's just some examples of what we might see in people that have autism. So in terms of social communication differences in how kind of back and forth social interactions go. For little kiddos that we see, kids, sorry, I've been trying to correct myself in using that word. We see maybe differences in back and forth play and pretend play with other people. For people who are more verbal, who have autism, this might look like differences compared to neurotypical individuals in conversation skills, kind of the back and forth of conversation skills. We also see differences in nonverbal communication. So this is like eye contact, facial expressions, just gestures, kind of using your hands to communicate is often reduced in people that have autism compared to people without. And then differences in how social relationships are made or developed or understood. And then in terms of repetitive behaviors, some of the differences that we might see in people with autism are the presence of repetitive kind of behaviors in body movements, maybe body kind of rocking or hand movements that are repetitive, repetitive speech, so saying maybe the same phrases or kind of scripts again and again, or repetition with objects. So maybe liking to have things orderly, kind of organized in certain ways, or doing the same thing with objects again and again that gives them pleasure and joy. So we also see differences in a preference for keeping things the same in some people with autism. And sometimes this can look like kind of rigidity of liking a certain routine or how things are arranged in their space. Intense or fixated interests are really common, and this might be kind of knowing a lot about a particular topic and being a real expert in a particular area and gathering a lot of information or facts about it and sharing that with other people. And then sensory sensitivities, I think we've increasingly realized, are very common in people with autism. And this can be oversensitivity, so being oversensitive to sounds that might, to people without autism, sound just like an average volume or quality might sound different and can be distressing for people with autism. It can also be an undersensitivity where they seek out different sensory input because it actually may feel comforting, like tight squeezes or certain kind of textures that they might touch. So those are the behaviors that we see with autism spectrum disorder. There are these differences are present in early childhood. So as Jake was kind of reading the governor's proclamation, one of the things that was on there was that these differences are evident in an early age. So we see this in really little guys, that may come to us in particular at the Autism Center. Autism is really common, and I think increasingly more common than we have realized. The most recent research study looking at the prevalence of autism in the United States found that, which came out this past year, found that 1 in 54 children in the United States have actually a diagnosis of autism, and it's possible that there are more than that are under-recognized and don't actually have a diagnosis. We know that's certainly true in adulthood. In our state, this equates to about 36,000 children who are aged 3 to 17 years with a diagnosis of autism. Again, this is an actual diagnosis of autism. Autism is 4 times more common in boys than girls, although there's a lot of conversations about how often autism is missed in girls, because we're so used to kind of seeing this lens of what autism has looked like in boys that we miss it a lot in girls and women. And we also talk about, when we're talking with families, and this has been a lesson that we have really worked on with our advocates who have our autistic advocates that work side by side with us in the LEND program and others, of really moving from a deficit model where we're talking about impairments or challenges, and really also focusing on the many strengths that people with autism have and bring to the table. So this is one example that has a kind of nice visual that goes along with it, but the mentality is really kind of focusing on the flip side of what are some of the gifts that having autism bring. And these are some examples that we know, and you, I'm sure, will recognize others, but some examples would be a strong attention to detail and being quite accurate in factual information, having a more kind of methodical approach, more kind of analytical in recognizing patterns. In some ways, having a deep focus or concentration in certain areas. And these are all kind of broad strokes. Certainly, these won't be true for everybody that has autism, but just some examples of kind of commonalities that people with autism, the strengths they bring to the table. So at the Autism Center, we opened in 2009, and we have a very large staff. We have 70 providers and staff that work with us at the Children's Autism Center, and we provide services and supports for diagnosis and treatment of autism spectrum disorder. And I think we'll be hearing more about this later, but we also are under our umbrella of Seattle Children's includes the Alyssa Burnett Adult Life Center, and I think we'll be hearing more about that later. But at the Children's Autism Center itself, we see more than 4,000 unique patients or individuals annually and 20,000 visits. And so this is a very high volume. This is the highest volume ambulatory care, which is kind of outpatient, not hospital-based, not inpatient clinic at Seattle Children's. And it's the largest in the whole country in terms of the number of patients that come through our door. We see we serve a full range of families. So more than in terms of socioeconomic spectrum. So we see more than half of our patients are served by Medicaid insurance. And we see a diverse range of families coming to see us from across Washington state. We also see kids up till, well, at the moment, it's up till 21 officially. So we see kids from really infancy, early toddler years, all the way up the age spectrum until 21. And the Alyssa Burnett Center obviously sees more than that. We have a wide range of providers that work at our center, including some of these that are listed here. So we have medical providers like nurse practitioners, developmental pediatricians, neurologists, nursing support, child psychiatrists, we have psychologists like myself, we have speech language pathologists, behavior analysts, nutritionists. That's part of our feeding program that I'll talk about in just a sec, and then many others. And these are some of the examples of some of the services that we provide, and they're changing pretty frequently. I think this is a pretty comprehensive list. In terms of our programs, and these are kind of larger scale interdisciplinary programs that have lots of different types of providers under one clinic. And that would be our biobehavior program, which focuses on providing supports for families and kids that have very severe challenging behaviors like self-injury, where kids are injuring themselves deliberately and causing harm to themselves. And then we also have a pediatric feeding program that focuses on feeding supports for kids with autism, but also with other developmental disabilities. We have an early intervention program that's housed at our center and running in person right now. And we also, we provide a range of outpatient services, diagnostic evaluations. We offer cognitive behavioral therapy individually and then also in groups. We have an anxiety and mood disorders clinic, and that has been very busy this past year in particular. And as Zach mentioned, suicidal ideation is unfortunately can be common in teens and adults with autism, and that's one of the things that we've seen an increase of this past year during our pandemic, and one of the things that we treat in our mood disorders clinic. We also offer medical workups, medication management, ongoing follow-up care, and then parent-mediated interventions where parents are the ones that are able to do the intervention at home. And I'll just finish up by talking about our parent and community education that we offer, and this has been increasing in recent years too. So we have offered for a long time Autism 101, which is a quarterly, really more of a lecture on the basics of autism and supports that are available. And those are available, all of these are live streamed now, none of them are in person yet. We offer a monthly Autism 200 series that's available online on Facebook Live and also recorded. We have first steps classes that are small group and focused on providing support after an initial diagnosis of autism. And we have kind of 2 age groups for that. We also have a similar program for feeding supports. And then we have a next steps program, which is a caregiver education program focused on transitioning from adolescence to young adulthood. And we have 2 tracks for that. And we have an autism blog, and we've newly updated our website that has lots of good information there. So we have a family resource and nursing supports that are available at our center too, that help kind of in between appointments. And then I guess what I'll say just here is that there's lots of changes on the horizon. We have a new building that we'll move into here pretty soon in the next couple of years. And then we have had a significant transition to telehealth services this past year along with everybody else. So I thought this was kind of a cool thing to show that we had prior to here, April 2020, these were our telehealth sessions, like 15 appointments in January, 18 in February. And then starting in April, May, and July, we transitioned entirely to telehealth. So we have upwards of 700 appointments happening from across the state at the Autism Center. So with that, I'll just leave these websites up here. And I think these will be available. My slides will be available later for everybody in case they want to click on the sites. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. That was really awesome information. I relate a lot with as an autistic myself. Sadly, we don't really have any time for questions. So if you have questions for Jen, Susie would be more than happy to put down her email so that you can email your questions to her. So thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Ivanova.
All right, so our next presenter is Gary Stobie, who will be presenting on, he is the medical director of the UW Medicine Adult Autism Clinic. Take it away, Gary.
Thanks, Ivanova. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great, thanks. Well, it's great to see such a group of friendly and familiar faces. I know a number of you. Those that don't know me, I'm Gary Stobie. I'm an adult neurologist by training, so I'm a medical doctor, and I trained in a day when unfortunately medical doctors got very little exposure to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'd like to say that that's improved a lot but sadly, it hasn't improved enough. And we spend a lot of time at our adult autism clinic. I spend time with Jen Gertz at the UW Lend trainee program at Seattle Children's Autism Center, educating providers about the needs and the gaps in services, which are huge, as many and most of you know. I think that because we don't do a good enough job in our medical training on this education, those of us that have an interest in this field, we learn from the source, from you all. Your voices and your advocacy is far and away the most important thing to educate legislators, to educate your neighbor across the street, and to educate your medical provider about the needs and how these needs are unmet. And one of the reasons I got so interested in this field as an adult neurologist was I got to see the progress and benefit that people receive by community participation and by educational opportunities and lifelong learning. I have been so impressed by the progress that humans make, all humans, when they are in an environment that is supported and enriched, in which there are opportunities to participate and learn. And I am 100% convinced that this is at the core of what we need. And unfortunately, we are way behind in this area. And we can see the evidence that we are behind, by the numbers that Zach Sadiq often points out about higher suicidal rate, from a higher incidence of depression and anxiety for autistic people, both teenagers and adults. We see the high unemployment rate for autistic people, as well as people with other intellectual and developmental disabilities. We see the housing crisis, and we see a mental health crisis, and we see increased risk for physical conditions with aging amongst people with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. I see examples, though, of hope. I see examples of individuals that do have support and do have opportunities to continue to learn, and the progress that individuals make, that we need to get access to these opportunities for everyone. Because right now, it's opportunities for community participation, I would classify as a scarce resource. There are not enough places. There are not enough programs. There are not enough services. There are not enough service providers. The barriers and gaps are huge in our state of Washington. I feel like we've made some progress during the years of my career, but not nearly enough. And I feel like the only way that we're going to make the progress that we need is through our continued advocacy. I didn't think as when I went to medical school that I was going to become, that so much of my job was going to be involved in advocacy. But when I've seen the value of community participation and opportunities for lifelong learning, as a medical doctor, these are the things that I teach my residents and medical students that you guys need to learn, because these are going to be the ways that you're going to help people. Yes, I need my medical skills when people are in crisis and when people are hospitalized with suicidality, or severe challenges that threaten their own health or the health of their loved ones. I need my medical skills, and I need to train my medical doctors those skills. But we need also to increase the workforce in in-home care providers. We need to increase the workforce in speech and occupational therapists that work with adults. We need to increase the workforce in vocational counselors and their knowledge on how to work with autistic people and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We need to increase opportunities for post-secondary education. Educational instructors, both with special ed backgrounds and those with general ed backgrounds, need to understand the value of inclusion, not just for people with autism and intellectual and developmental disabilities, but for the average person on the street, the value. I have been so impressed, and I can live this. I'm a lived example of this, of the benefit that I've had in my personal life of doing the work that I've done, the benefits that my children have received by having a perspective of openness and celebration. I'm so happy to see Autism Awareness Month has changed, and so it's more appreciation. I'd like to get to the point of celebration and celebrating differences, because I think that is where we see such value. So our program at the just to close out, we have made progress. We have those of us at the University of Washington and Seattle Children's, we have made progress with the Alyssa Burnett Adult Life Center in Bothell, where we've created a center where we have training opportunities for recreational therapists, art therapists, music therapists. We're now clearing the way for training opportunities for speech and occupational therapists. And we've created a model where our hard work and job at the University of Washington is to do the research so that we can prove, not just on some individual case basis, but as a group as a whole, that programs like the Alyssa Burnett Adult Life Center are not a cost. They are an investment. They're an investment in our future of everyone. And I think programs like this can prove that through lifelong learning and increased participation, you can have improvement in quality of life for autistic people and people with other intellectual and developmental disabilities. And you can have improvement in the quality of society as a whole. So I hope that we can see more programs like that. As we strive to close Rainier School and Fircrest as an institution, I do not want to see those get closed without replacement of supports in the community. That is absolutely what we have to see. Those things have to be hand in hand. We can't just close. We have to close and redirect those funds. Those funds have to go into the community to support people in their lives. And I think then my job, to help provide training opportunities for people that provide that support, then I can focus on what I can do at the university. So I just want to again thank all of you for your voices, your voices on however you communicate through a tablet or through your vocal cords or through signing. However you communicate, your voice is the most important at the table. And they'll listen to me sometimes, but I need to go with you if we're gonna really convince the people that can approve budget changes so that we can get these services where we need them. So again, thank you, Ivanova. Thanks to the ARC and the DD Council and everyone on this call. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Dr. Gary Stobbe. That is very valuable information. So we're not going to take any questions at this time. If you have questions for Dr. Stobbe, I'm sure he would be more than willing to post his email in the chat, and you can email him your questions. So thank you again, Dr. Stobbe, for your time. Next in our lineup is the epic Zach Sudek, and he's a fellow autistic friend of mine. Take it away, Zach.
Thanks, Ivanova. I'm not sure I've ever been called epic in my life before, but it feels like an honor coming from you, so I appreciate that. Yeah. So hi everyone. My name is Zach Sadiq. I am autistic. I'm a social worker, activist, and community organizer. I currently work for the ARC of King County as the Disability Systems Navigation Coordinator. And I also oversee a series of social and support groups for autistic folks in Washington State called the Square Pegs. It's our attempt to try and create a sense of community when it can be kind of hard to find that when we're a marginalized population and the world might not necessarily understand us for who we are. And so much of what I do just comes out of like the experiences I had as a kid, like growing up. I didn't really know like anyone else like me. I was probably one of the first autistic folks, ever like officially diagnosed in my school district. And I just had so many, teachers, like professionals who, like really wanted to help and had the best intentions, but, they really didn't know what it was like to be autistic. They really couldn't put themselves in my shoes and understand why I was doing the things I did. And it was just a really isolating experience growing up. The message I usually got about my autism was like, since I'm so quote unquote high functioning, and I hate that term for a lot of reasons, that like my autism really wasn't going to be a problem, in my life, and that if I just sort of like hide it away, like that's what's going to be best, like that's what's going to be easiest. And I sort of like internalized that message because like I didn't have any other messages about my autism. I was isolated from other people like me. And, I believed that like, hey, my autism isn't going to impact me. I can do anything I want. I believed that, right up until I was fired from my first 2 jobs after college. And then I realized like, hey, it's not really up to me, if my autism is going to be a problem or not. It's really up to the good graces of the non-autistic, non-disabled people around me. And, like if I'm so quote unquote high functioning and if it's so like easy for me, like what's happening to all the other autistic people out there who, might have it harder than me. So that sort of like radicalized me to become a social worker. Here I am today doing this talk. And, I've just realized, throughout my experience, through hearing the stories of all the autistic people I know, like there are so many barriers in our lives. Probably one of the biggest is the unemployment rate. 80% of autistic people right now are unemployed. So that means like we probably won't have money to pay for like housing. We might not have, money to pay for food. And it's all the harder when, like in Washington State, for instance, I would guess maybe 20-ish% of autistic people actually qualify for developmental disability services. So for the rest of us, it means, there's really no dedicated state supports for us. Like we have to use the community mental health system, which, receives, as far as I've seen, no specific training on like autism or developmental disabilities. And, like same as the homelessness system, a lot of autistic people, because, we end up unemployed, can't rely on having stable housing, and we can't live in like loud and crowded shelters. And this naturally like leads to the unfortunately high suicide rate. Like the autistic suicide rate is 9 times greater than the general population. When you consider some of the other like marginalized identities the autistic person might have, that rate could go even higher. And I think it's important to point out that like if you have other marginalized identities, if you're Black, if you're trans, if you're not a dude, like those, like there's just so much greater disparity. And oftentimes like the support system that exists out there can barely handle the autism. But when it comes to like, understanding the experience of being autistic and Black, like good luck finding a supportive person out there. And so I've just realized like throughout my life that, autistic folks face a lot of implicit bias. It's not actually up to us on whether or not our needs are going to be accommodated. The research has shown that like people will like other people's brains essentially like produce a fear response whenever they're around an autistic person, whether or not they know we're autistic. And so that means like it's much harder to get, hired for jobs, much harder to, have success in like dating or romantic relationships. It just means that like, there's that additional barrier, and folks aren't really even talking about that. Like there are literally right now more studies on how broccoli impacts our social skills as autistic people than, autism and implicit bias, or autism and domestic violence, or autism and homelessness. So there's got to be a lot of like transformative justice that really needs to happen in the research world. And ultimately, like, yeah, things aren't going to get better for autistic people until until the non-autistic people get over the implicit bias, until they, are able to realize both like consciously and unconsciously that like difference isn't a bad thing. Autism, as it's often framed, is seen as a tragedy, and that just perpetuates stigma. That doesn't help us, in the meantime. Like, it still means that we're just going to be marginalized in our lives. So, as a response to like all of the stigma, all of the harm, all of the pain, like we as autistic people have essentially had to build our own community, our own sense of identity. So, probably the earliest example of this was a essay called Don't Mourn for Us by Jim Sinclair, which, was probably the first attempt to really counter the tragedy narrative of autism that was perpetuated back in, as early as 1993. Early communities formed through, like online bulletin board services and chat boards, throughout the early 90s. And then as you get into the like 2000s, you start to see communities like AutStreet, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the Autistic Women's and Non-Binary Network, the Square Pigs, and like many other community groups. Like we've essentially had to look after ourselves, because right now it feels like no one else really is doing that for us right now. The way the system is built right now is that, it's instead of like trying to find a biological cure, it just tries to find essentially a behavioral cure. Like masking is promoted, as y'all probably saw in the governor's proclamation. And, right now that just doesn't help us ultimately. Like, we deserve to exist. We didn't choose to be born autistic. I'm sure y'all didn't choose to be, born neurotypical. Like, we are who we are. We can't help that. And so, our differences should be celebrated. Like, autistic folks have contributed so much, to the sciences, for example, folks like Temple Grandin, Stephen Shore, Dora Raymaker. Like, there are so many other like awesome autistic research scientists out there whose different like thought patterns are really leading the way in, their various fields. And like seeing the world in a different way brings us so many other things. Like, deaf people are responsible for, creating like text messaging. Folks with physical disabilities, like their existence brought us automatic door openers and, curb cuts. It is absolutely possible for autistic people to succeed outside of the science as well. Like, folks like Bjork, Anthony Hopkins, Daryl Hannah, Tim Burton, Dan Aykroyd, and so many more have just shown that, like, you can be openly autistic and you can do great things in the world. And it really comes down to being in accepting spaces. So with regards to, like what non-autistic people can do for us, the first thing that needs to happen is that like autistic rights need to be seen as human rights and civil rights. Like, we're asking for inclusion, we're asking for acceptance, we're asking to be heard. And right now it feels like that's not happening. Another issue that needs to change is like representation. In the vast majority of autism serving agencies right now, like they don't employ any autistic people, as far as I know. And thinking back to my experience with all of the well-meaning professionals I had growing up, like there is so much that gets missed. It is easy to create a stigmatizing environment without even realizing it, even if you have the best intentions, and you absolutely need autistic people, working alongside you. You need to have an organizational culture that welcomes autistic people and just doesn't see having like one token autistic person representing all autistic people as the be all end all. You really need engagement with the autistic community. And so like if you're working in organizations like that, in order to help us, you really need to start advocating for us to, be hired. Like, we have an 80% unemployment rate. Like that's one thing you can absolutely do to help change things. Like autistic people need to be board members. There has to be, like formalized engagement with the autistic community. It's happening in other places across the country, and I think it really needs to start happening in Washington state as well. And I guess the final thing I'm gonna, end with is that value should not exist solely by being able to do things in a neurotypical way. Our differences are gifts. Like we're able to bring so much more to the table. Like our different thought patterns and processes have done so much for the world, and we can do so much more if the non-autistic people are willing to get past their defensiveness and discomfort and listen to us. And until then, we're still going to have the high suicide rates and unemployment rates. So in order for things to change, we've been advocating for 20 years. Like it's on our allies and community members to really make sure the changes happen. So I appreciate that you all are, in this fight alongside of us, and I'm hopeful that the future will be better than the way it is now. So
Amen.
thank you all so much.
Thank you, Zach. Such wise words from the epic Zach Surdek. Now we're going to hear from another epic self-advocate and also friend, David Staden. Take it away, David.
A little nervous, so. Sorry, I'm also basically in the same room with my mom, so there's a little bit of feedback going on. Anyway, so yeah, I'm basically self-advocate. My name's David. Basically one of the things that that sorry, my mind's kind of going on track. I haven't spoken in a while. One of the things that when it comes to my attitude when it comes to autism is usually for me it's kind of for a case of, hey, it's basically who I am, and if you basically don't like who I am, or basically because I have autism, okay, then just go away, back off. That's what I basically end up saying. And basically one of the things that does kind of like help me out on things is mostly my mechanical work kind of stuff. So like dealing with my computer and basically like building, like for example, little model kit things if it'll show up a little easier. But yeah, basically yeah, for me, like I said, when it comes to the whole autism thing, it is who I am, and I basically embrace it. And I think actually the whole autism awareness thing, or pretty much embracement, or I can't remember what it was called already, is actually a pretty good thing because there are people out there who actually, in basically like actually having the autistic trait and thrive with it. I mean, a lot of the programming stuff I do, a lot of the computer stuff I do. Basically I've been doing like a lot of computer animation project stuff. It's been kind of a really interesting thing. So yeah.
Thank you, David. Anything
Might as
else?
well. I could probably show like the actual like animation stuff that I kind of work on.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that it's a sadly because of how it's up. There we go. Now it's actually kind of reacting a little bit because it's basically reacts to sound and stuff like that. So I have that. Then I have basically like a little animation thing going on.
Oh my land, that is legit.
And then the actual final animation. So this is kind of
that
stuff
is so cool.
So this is kind of stuff that I do in my spare time.
That's awesome. Now that's what I call talent right there.
So yeah, it basically, and it takes a good computer to try to deal with it, but the technology has been kind of helping me out actually deal with like the creative outlets and stuff like that. So it's actually,
No, he did not have a disability. And that's what. Well, and I really thought that in the 80s, using Jerry Ryan, I think his name was.
But yeah, I thought it was pretty.
That was really
It's pretty much really interesting on how the actual basically computer stuff of what I do. I usually do this kind of stuff in spare time. In fact, the model you just saw, I literally set up in like 48 hours just for the meeting. So yeah.
Is Miss late to the party here?
Thank you, David, for showing us your epic talents and skills. And this is a great example of autism is it's not a deficit. It's actually helpful, and it gives people many talents. So thank you for sharing that, David.
Thanks.
And now we're going to go on to our bills of interest with Diane Staddard.
Hello, everyone. So I am going to share my screen here. Hold on just a sec there. Okay, so these are our bills of interest that we've been watching lately, and I know we're running way behind, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through them. But at this point, and one of the big ones for self-advocates with autism, and that's Zach was talking about that unemployment rate. Well, part of the employment we do have is sub-minimum wage, paid less than minimum wage for work just because the person has a disability. And self-advocates have been working on a bill, Senate Bill 5284, to get rid of the certificates that allow employers to pay 2 or 3 cents an hour instead of minimum wage. So that bill has made it almost all the way through. It's got to get passed on the House floor, and then the bill will become law. And that's what happens with some of the other bills that we're watching too. There's a lot of legal bills that we're tracking, some educational bills, some for residential services, and then the employment bill. These are available on our website. You can always get the most up-to-date one on our webpage under Advocacy. And I'm going to just run through this now and turn it over to Alex so that he can wrap us up for the day. We stay online for another half hour or so people can visit and network. So you're welcome to do that after Alex wraps it up for us.
take it away, Alex.
You're on the air, Alex.
Good. Good morning. I want to take you through the steps of how to find hearings and floor action on TVW. First step is to type into your webpage browser tvw.org. This takes you to the TVW homepage. In the upper right-hand corner, you will find a place where you can click Schedule. Then you will see a list of hearings and floor actions on TVW. Find the event you want to view and then click Video link to the event. I hope you will enjoy your event. Additionally, we need to make sure you are satisfied with Advocacy Day. Do not forget your evaluation. Next week is the last Advocacy Day. We want as many advocates to attend as possible. Be sure to fill out our feedback form. Let's walk through it together. Advocacy Day is a project of the ARC of Washington State and funded by the Developmental Disabilities Council. Your feedback helps us to continue improving and helping your voice to be heard. Start by putting in your email address. Next, you select the Advocacy Day you are giving input for. Today is March 31st, Autism Awareness, Acceptance and Appreciation Month Day. Then you respond if this is your first Advocacy Day or not. Next, you pick the smileys that answer how you feel about the virtual Advocacy Day. Then you submit the form.
So did you wrap it up, Alex, or is there still another piece to it? I think you may be having trouble getting that working. Well, we really appreciate everybody joining us today for Advocacy Day. We hope you'll fill out the feedback form, and we hope you will join us next week for Equity and Diversity and Developmental Disabilities. It's going to be our last virtual Advocacy Day for this session. So we really hope that everyone will join us and learn what you can do to make an equitable and diverse society that includes people with developmental disabilities and appreciates and celebrates the gifts they bring. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.